And now, from the Room 111 studios, it's Hacking Engagement with James Sternovic.
Well, hey there, listener. Welcome back to the Hacking Engagement podcast. I'm so glad you're here. Did you ever hear of a book called The Portrait of Dorian Gray? It was an Oscar Wilde novel in the late 19th century. I can't remember when I read it, but I read it. I thought it was really strange. And the whole point of the book is that this really vain guy has this portrait of himself. And he doesn't age, but the portrait does. And over time, the portrait gets really old and craggy. Well, the reason I bring this up is because my father was a teacher, and he once said that teaching is like the portrait of Dorian Gray in reverse, in the sense that the students never age, but you sure the heck do. I'm bringing this up because, man, I got 40 years on my students, man, and that just doesn't really seem possible, but I do. And I really believe that I have a good relationship with my students. I think we have that good, solid teacher-student relationship, but come on, man. 40 years is a big gap. So the observations I make, the feedback that I give to them is valuable, but it cannot match the feedback of their peers, the kid that's sitting right beside them that's the same age. Furthermore, as with it as I like to think I am, I still speak an older language. I cannot communicate with kids on their level like I could when I was maybe a rookie teacher. So you young teachers out there, you capitalize on that. It will not last. That's one sad thing. Well, I'm bringing this up today because I just became exposed recently to a tech tool called PeerGrade that is quite frankly the way to revolutionize the way student collaboration, peer evaluation is done in your classroom. And I have Kristen Spade, who used to be referred to as Kristen Kovac, episode 39. She's the Lorax, the paperless woman. She also talked to the HyperDocs girls, did a great job. She came to me at the end of last year, school year, and said, "Got to try this thing called PeerGrade. I've been using PeerGrade. It's awesome." So, Kristen and I, man, we're risk takers. So we get in touch with the president and CEO of PeerGrade, who lives in Denmark. His name is David Kofoed Wind, and he's on today's episode. And he's great, man. Wait till you hear his voice. His voice is awesome. I could just listen. I should just stop talking in this episode and just listen to his voice. You're going to love it. His English is flawless, and he's going to talk about his experience being a teacher and grading all this stuff and himself and maybe thinking there's a better way. Now, that's certainly a great hook right there, man. Buckle up. You're going to love this episode. Hey, so get this, listener. My publisher contacts me and says, "I love the way Hacking Engagement is selling. How about doing 50 more?" I was all over it like a cheap suit. So the name of the book is Hacking Engagement Again, 50 Teacher Tools That Will Make Students Love Your Class. And it's going to be available on Amazon's virtual shelves in the late summer of 2017. In the meantime, if you're looking for more teacher empowerment resources, as always, visit hacklearning.org. Now let's get back to the solutions part of the Hacking Engagement podcast. So here we are at the Room 111 studios, but my guest isn't here, man. One of my colleagues is here. This is Kristen Spade, who you may remember from the Lorax episode. How you doing, friend?
I'm doing great.
So her name now is, let us know.
Kristen Spade.
And did you just change your name for some odd reason? Why'd you do that?
Oh, no. I got married over the summer out in Yellowstone National Park.
Oh, my God. Oh, I have to talk to you about that.
Yes,
hey, as soon as the episode's over, I got to talk to her about this. Sidebar, total sidebar. Our other guest is named David Kofoed Wind. He isn't in the room with us right now. He's not in the Room 111 studios. As a matter of fact, he's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 time zones away to the east of us. He's in Denmark. What's up, my man? How you doing, David?
I'm good. Happy to be here.
Well, you have a wonderful voice. I wanted to tell you that.
That's good to hear.
And,
that's the first time somebody ever told me that.
Oh, I don't believe that. That was the first time?
Yeah.
Okay, and you folks in Europe are so much smarter than us here in the United States. How old were you when you learned how to speak English?
Oh, we start young. Start at 5 years.
5 years old, you started speaking English.
Well, I wasn't fluent at 5 years, right? But that's when we start learning.
And so what other languages do you speak?
Well, I stopped there, right? Why learn anything else? No, they tried to teach us German or French in like 7th grade, but I think it's too late. It's too late for most people to really like get into a new language, and the entire world speaks English, right? So that's what we get sticks. That's what we stick.
And that's kind of what we're banking on. So we decide not to learn any other languages.
It's a good strategy. I think
that's our problem, man. It's
the American way.
Yeah. Now, tell us about what's your position, sir?
My position, sir. That's very formal. So I'm.
That's as formal as it's going to get. Enjoy it, man.
Yeah,
it stops after that.
I'm co-founder and CEO of PeerGrade, and then I'm also supposedly a PhD student at the Technical University of Denmark.
Very good, sir. Very good, sir. Now, you're on with us today, and you're going to talk about this really neat tech tool called PeerGrade that I think is starting to make some waves here in the United States, and we're going to try to help that process along. So here's the thing. We have a tradition here in the United States when sometimes challenge those with an idea to give an elevator pitch. So I want you to imagine that you and I are on an elevator with someone who'd benefit from using your product, but you only have a couple floors before the person exits. Give my listeners your elevator pitch to this person who desperately needs PeerGrade.
Okay, challenge accepted. So I hope we get it before the elevator stops. So
that's right. It's moving right now, brother.
PeerGrade is a product for teachers and students that allows them to, in a very quick and easy way, do peer feedback. Mm-hmm. And peer feedback is a really smart way for students to give feedback to each other. So the teacher can spend their time on other things than grading, and students can learn a lot in the process.
That's perfect. So all of a sudden, man, I'm very interested. I'm going to pretend like I'm that person. I'm turning around and going, wow, I'm having a hard time getting kids to collaborate in my class. Now, Kristen, you deal with this stuff all the time. Kid collaboration, it ain't easy, is it?
No. And a lot of the times with how we used to do peer grading, the higher level kids would get with the higher level kids. Some of the lower level or kids that weren't going to put in as much effort tend to get with other students like that. So I really like how PeerGrade randomizes who gets whose essay or item to provide feedback on. Yeah. I think it gave everybody a much more fair shot at getting a variety of feedback.
And it's also just kind of neat.
Yeah.
It's just kind of neat how all of a sudden, oh, wow, I've got this kid's work, and it's my job to fairly evaluate it. It's just neat how it just appears.
Yeah, and I love how it actually scores the person giving the feedback, too. That's been super useful for me so far this year.
Yeah, David, we're big fans. Now, tell me how this fascinating idea emerged and then evolved into this really cool tool. How did it happen?
Yeah, so I still teach myself. I teach a computer science course in a university in Copenhagen, and 3 years ago it was a small course with 20 students, and then I changed the title to something with big data, and that's super popular. So 150 people signed up instead, and everything is slightly complicated with 150 students. So I decided to build PeerGrade for myself as a way to stop having to grade so many papers, right? So I was spending all my time on grading. Nobody was really learning from it. Yeah. The students could provide much better feedback than me because they have much more time per paper. Yeah. They would learn from giving that feedback, and all the time that I saved, I could reinvest that into more meaningful activities.
That is a great story, sir. That is awesome. So, in other words, it was just how can I make my job easier? And then it became, wow, how can I make my job better, a better learning environment for my kids? Then became, how can I share this idea with others?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you went from this idea to a tool that now someone in Ohio is talking to you about. How'd you make that leap?
Yeah, it started very slowly. My supervisor wanted to use it. My other supervisor wanted to use it. And then some other guy wanted to use it. And they were like, okay, maybe we should put this into a product and put it on the internet.
And so this is probably all you're doing now.
It is all I'm doing. Don't tell my supervisor because he won't be happy.
Okay, now this is a great question because I think you answered it some, but I'm going to let Kristen jump in here if you're thinking about peer grade, and again, we're on that elevator and you're talking to, say, another educator, what needs does this satisfy?
Well, I mean, I think it's a lot more useful than the traditional method of peer grading that we've done where you just trade papers with somebody. Mm-hmm. The kids don't really have a lot of direction on what they're doing with this paper that got put in front of them. So I liked how in peer grade I was able to specifically list, and I could even have them rated on a numerical scale, or however I wanted to organize the question. I could tell them exactly what I wanted them to be looking for. And I think the option to make it anonymous was awesome because a lot of the kids, especially with some of the essays we worked on this year, they wrote like college app essay that had to deal with some personal topics. They liked not everybody knowing whose it was. And then with my juniors, they wrote some kind of creative stories inspired by some Native American myths we wrote. They loved getting to guess and see whose story they might have read. They took a lot more excitement from it than a traditional peer editing session, I thought.
David, Kristen and I work with students that are a lot younger than yours. And the thing that I love so much about this, and maybe Kristen will back me up on this, it's sometimes hard to get kids to take things seriously when you're doing collaboration. And I think the anonymous nature, what I witnessed was that they really took this task seriously, that they really wanted to do a good job for this person. And that was true pretty much with all my kids.
Absolutely. And that was something I kind of worried about when I was starting, with it being anonymous. Maybe they'd be a little harsh, but I really saw the opposite. I saw kids, even with essays that probably weren't going to get scored that highly, they were finding really nice, positive things to give feedback on.
Has that been your experience too?
Yeah, I think it's surprising but it's also what research shows, right? That students are actually, they think a lot about the feedback they get from their peers. You know this from their normal lives, right? And this also transcends into teaching, that they really care about what people think about their work and their feedback. And of course, what makes this really work is that the teacher is there to moderate the process, right? So the teacher can see all the feedback students write to each other and kind of go in and change some stuff or help out if there's any problems. But generally, students are really nice and also much better at giving feedback than people immediately anticipate.
Well, one thing that you said there that was really crucial was you said that feedback from peers is more meaningful to students. Go a little bit with that. Elaborate some on that.
Yeah, so I think there's many things at play, right? So one of them is that students are simply sometimes better at writing feedback to other students because they're on the same wavelength.
Right.
Sometimes teachers are talking over their heads. And the other thing is that it's peer impressions and those things are really important for students, right? They really care about their peers. So I think one of the scariest things about peer feedback in the beginning for students is like, oh no, somebody's going to see my poem. That's scary for everybody, right? But kind of peer feedback is a way to train that into being something normal and making kids comfortable with showing off their work and giving feedback to each other.
What's the average age of your students?
It's hard to say. I think the youngest we have are like 9 years old. We have a lot of kids that are 30, right? So we have a lot of higher education users as well. So it's a big mix. I think the average is probably 10th grade or something like that.
Okay. I was going to say, because we're dealing with freshmen to seniors. In the U.S., that's 14 to 18-year-old kids.
Yeah.
And boy, peer feedback's pretty darn important to them, man. Peer everything's
it really
important
is.
to them. Yeah. Now,
and I think the act of giving and receiving feedback is a really important life skill, right? And it's not something that you necessarily get a good chance to train in any structured way. So peer feedback is probably the best way to train students to become better at giving and receiving meaningful feedback to each other.
David, your English is marvelous.
Thank you.
How's that for some peer feedback?
That's good. I'm happy.
Now I'm going to turn it over to Kristen here because, see, Kristen, I always kid her because she is my mentor, even though she's a lot younger than me. And I think she's getting used to me saying that. So I just think she just blows past that now. But she turned me on to your tech tool here. And so I'm going to turn it over to her, and she's going to talk about how she utilized it. Go ahead.
Okay, so I've used it in both my junior and senior English classes this year. And as I mentioned earlier, the juniors were writing their very own Native American creation myth. So it was kind of a more fun story, not a lot of very serious requirements, but we wanted to make sure they had all parts of the plot arc and so many of the different elements of the creation myths that we studied. So that was super useful. Once I uploaded it to peer grade, the peers were able to really quickly chart what parts of the plot arc they hit, what they were missing. Sometimes with storytelling, it all makes sense in your head, but as soon as someone else tries to read it, there's a gaping hole somewhere or other. So that was also really useful. The kids kind of pointing out parts that didn't make sense or parts to add. And then with my seniors, I had them write, we have something called the Common App here, where you can apply to about 400 schools in America using one essay. So they were writing essays for that. So very crucial for them because, most all of them are writing a college essay. So to get all that valuable feedback, not only from peers, but for me at the end of it was super valuable. So I think we had them go through like 4 different essays with that one just to make sure they were getting a wide variety of feedback. And that was the one that I was just so pleasantly surprised on how positive they were, how kind. Everybody was so excited to read their feedback. That's the thing that most surprised me and that I most love about peer grade is that, so often as teachers, we spend hours and hours writing all over these essays or documents only to see the kids leave them on your floor or throw them out. And the kids begged for time in class to get to read through their feedback. Everybody was so excited to look at it. So that was a game changer for me entirely.
And you said something really cool is you were talking about they noticed gaping holes.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, David, but you mentioned the fact that you were doing a lot of grading. And what happens to me sometimes, I just get wore out.
It's a very good point.
And so these kids are just looking at 1 or perhaps 2 or whatever essays. So they're fresh and they're ready to roll.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Okay, David, we listened to Kristen talk about how she's using peer grade and believe me, the way she did it's the way I did it. I was so impressed with what she did. But you are the peer grade guru, man. You're the clearinghouse of peer grade info. I'll bet you have some examples of how it's been used in a really creative way. Could you give us one?
Yeah, I think that's really an important part of the story, right? Because when people hear about peer grading, they often think, oh, I have all these papers I don't want to grade. I can use peer grade instead. And that's not necessarily the right way to approach peer grading, right? So another way to think about using your time effectively is to introduce things that you otherwise couldn't do. So an example is a high school teacher here in Denmark doing math. And as you often do in math is that you pick a random kid from their class and then you ask them to do a proof on the blackboard. And it takes a long time, but it's a really good exercise. But you don't pick a random kid, you pick the one that always knows their stuff, right? So they pick a kid in the class that they ask to do a proof on the blackboard. And of course they never pick a random kid, they always pick the one that knows the proof the best.
I didn't get picked.
Neither did I, but that was on purpose. But I always ducked to not get picked. Yeah. So what this teacher does is that he asks all the students to videotape each other in pairs and do the proofs on the blackboard. And then he asks them all to submit their video proofs to peer grade. Right. So not only do the students get to see other people's proofs, but everybody gets to go to the blackboard. And everybody gets their video seen, right? So normally he can't do that. You can't have everybody go up and spend 10 minutes in front of the entire class. And he can't sit and watch videos all night, every day. So he's basically doing something that he otherwise couldn't do.
I love that. Let me just interrupt you for just a second because I hadn't even, I'm a humanities guy. I'm teaching history. I never thought about this as applicable to a math class. Your example is fascinating, and I can remember, David, being in that math class, and when some guy got up there and started writing on the board, man, that was social hour for me, man. That was the time to do some business with my friends. So that would really not only enhance collaboration, but student participation and self-directed learning. And the example that you gave us would be outstanding.
Exactly. And I think, so in terms of the history, another example we've seen is that students are asked to read a text before class, and then they have to discuss that text in class. Right. So a way to ensure that all students are kind of up to speed when they come to class, you can give them an exercise in peer grade that says, read the text and write 2 paragraphs of an analysis of the text, and then give a little bit of feedback to each other. And then when they come to class on Monday, they will all know the text. Everybody will know that everybody else read it. Everybody will have thought about it and seen some other people's perspectives. And then you can start the discussion off on a much higher level.
Kristen, you and I think we use this for a more in-depth comprehensive assignment. What do you think about that idea?
I think those are both awesome ideas, and I think I could definitely use those in my class as well. The other day, when I actually presented on peer grade at a PD session that we had for the staff, one of my friends who's a science teacher came and sat in my session, and she really liked the idea of peer grade, and we started talking about what she could do as a science teacher. And she has a lot of worksheets for her, like, freshman physical science classes where they're practicing different math-related activities and things like that. And she had the idea to put a worksheet on peer grade, have the kids answer it, and then for the feedback section, the kids would grade each other, and instead of just saying this answer was wrong, they would explain how to solve for the right answer. So kind of spend some time teaching whoever's paper they were giving feedback on how to actually solve for whatever they missed. So, I mean, I think you gave us some great ideas, David. I think you could really use peer grade in any subject. I don't think at all it should be English or humanities specific.
Okay, David. One piece of advice for somebody who's just starting to use this tool. Lay it on us.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for teachers when they start peer grade, they quickly realize that they have to set up an assessment rubric or a feedback rubric, and that's not very easy, right? So I think the best idea is to talk to your fellow co-teachers and ask them if they have any good ideas. And the other good advice is that on our website, we have what we call the rubric library, which you can find in the top menu of our website. And that's a lot of text about what good rubrics are, but also a lot of examples from different classes on how they set up a good feedback rubric. And hopefully that can inspire and help people getting started a little bit quicker.
The one thing that I struggled with just a bit when I started out was the turn it in time and the assessment time. But I messed it up the first day I did it, but I just came back the next day and did it. I mean, don't be intimidated. Anybody can do this. Believe me.
And there's also a quick note on that is that there is since not too long ago a new feature in peer grade called live sessions. And live sessions are meant for peer feedback in the classroom. So it's the same peer grade as you know, but without any deadlines. So as soon as students submit, they can start giving feedback. As soon as they've given feedback, they can start reading their feedback and so on. So that should solve some of the deadline problems that you had.
So I was not alone in that. So you heard that from some people and made some adjustments. That's wonderful.
Yes, exactly.
All right, Kristen, what's your advice?
Well, the first thing I would say is usually when you have someone on websites offering to chat you and give you help, they never really answer. I have been so surprised every single time I'm on peer grade and I chat asking a quick question, the person responds right back to me. So, I mean, the customer support is awesome. If you have a question in that little chat bubble that pops up, just ask it because they're so quick at getting back to you. And then the other advice I would give is just when you're pitching the idea to students the first time, just make them feel like the feedback they're giving is important and that the work is important. And I think you'll get a lot of student buy-in because that's the case for my class.
Excellent, man. And you know, they're so responsive that you can just Skype the president of the company and he'll talk to you for 20 minutes. It's incredible.
They were so excited to hear that. They all begged to be on.
Hey, my man, you're doing great work. We're going to try to spread the word here in the United States of America. Thank you so much for coming on.
I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, my man.
Thank you.
Bye.
So here we are at the What You Can Do Tomorrow section, and please go to Peer Grade and check it out. But I'm going to give you a strong piece of advice before you utilize this program. I like to go during my conference period and get some student guinea pigs out of study hall. And these kids, you know, they're a lot of times they're just sitting around kind of walking the dog, just looking for something to do. And so I'll walk in there and I'll say, you know, so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so, do you want to take a 15-minute break from study hall and come down and help me do something? And invariably I get lots of volunteers. So before I used Peer Grade for the first time, I got some kids down in my room and I had them just make a simple Google Doc, upload it to Peer Grade, and then just like a few sentences, and had them share that with one another so I could get the feel for the logistics of the process down of using Peer Grade. And once you use it, it's no big deal. But I found it was the whole concept was a little fuzzy when I first started using it. And as David said, you can also use Peer Grade Live, which eliminates a lot of the variables of kids turning it in on the right time and the collaboration phase being over. So get a couple student guinea pigs. Just take like a little narrative, have them write a few sentences and then peer grade one another, and then you'll be ready to use it in class. And once you start using it in class, I think that you could use it on a regular basis, because that's what I'm going to do. The thing that David said that was so powerful is how significant that peer feedback is, and how not only significant, but how appropriate it is, how kids are tuned into it. Hey man, peer grade is a great way to up the student collaboration and evaluation game in your classroom. Good luck tomorrow engaging your students.
Show notes for this episode can be found at jamesalansturdivant.com. If you enjoy Hacking Engagement, please subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes.